All right, we're going to Paul and Swami and Matt, if you will indulge us. It's up to you, of course, but we'd like to just sort of wrap up this with a neat little bow and have a few ending comments about what takeaways we've all gathered from this event, and perhaps we can hear some of them from you as well. Could we get the house mics up here to the stage? I'll share one of them, and I'll...
This one here.
Oh, okay. Grab that. I think we have enough for each of us. Yeah, have a seat. No, hang on to that, and then I'll keep this one. Yeah. Then we can all sit. I could use a sit. Okie doke. So we have our thought leader powerhouse panel up here, and what we thought we'd do is sort of go around and kind of talk about some things that we've heard here, but also maybe look forward a little bit, what some of the trends that we've talked about here will happen in the next few years. And I think we also should try to let the folks who are kind enough to stick around until the end, give them a few thoughts on what action can you take in the coming weeks, months, and years based on some of the things that we've learned here. So one of the things we heard about constantly, I think customer experience was probably the thing that was perhaps mentioned most. There's a few other things as well. I'm interested, I think it's probably interesting for those attending to understand what does that actually mean? I mean, what action do you take to improve customer experience? What defines a good customer experience? And perhaps also, what models should they look to for those who actually do master the customer experience equation? How about you start, Swami? Or Paul?
One of the real observations I got was in the breaks, seeing people on the supply side here talking with each other about how they can work together to best serve the publisher community. And I think we're starting to see more at these events. We saw it recently at Cinda in Valencia, the same thing. You know, I think more and more people in this room are coming to the equation where if you work together, 1 and 1 can equal 3. And I genuinely see that as something that has, 5 years ago that would never happen.
Sure.
And I think that's a real move forward, because I think more and more people in this room are conscious of the fact that if we do work together, we can achieve more for the publisher, which in terms means more for the end customer.
But give me one example of what that means. I hear work together a lot, but what work together in what way? And on what?
Well, a good example would be, the web.com, who I introduced yesterday, working with Mono, working with Web's Planet, about how they can come together to better serve their combined customers rather than working in isolation. And work, in Matchcraft's another great example, of a company that's open to collaboration. I think that is I think we're starting to see a lot more of that.
Okay. Swami? Back to the customer experience question, because Paul didn't really answer it.
Okay, so customer experience. So if I look at it broadly, as a business, you're focused on acquisition and retention. And, actually for us as directory players, traditionally we've always focused on the acquisition, be it acquiring new SMBs or for the SMBs to acquire new customers. Customer experience has become particularly important in the last 3-4 years, which actually brings the focus back from acquisition to retention. So if the bottom line for any business, be it us running a directory business or SME service provider business, or the bottom line for that SME is, the question you need to ask them is, retention comes before acquisition. So before you build an acquisition strategy, before you start building a lead capture mechanism, have you understood how you're able to retain your customers? So that's pretty much the high level flipping in the mind, the importance of retention over acquisition. Don't try to bring a new customer if you're not able to retain the existing one. Now there are 3 tools that are available for managing this whole customer experience better, or at least applying customer experience as a science across your organization with your sales team, with your customer success team, and with your management. So the first tool is measuring customer lifetime value. So if you are delivering good customer experience, it means you're able to measure clearly what your customer lifetime value is, which normally we might not otherwise. The second link to that is that lifetime value should increase, which means the share of spend of the customer should increase because you're delivering better customer experience. So if you take a service provider like us, servicing an SME, it means today, if you're servicing 2 or 3 offerings, and has that grown to 4 or 5 that the SME needs, that you're able to, so your sales guy who's walking in is walking back with 5 more items that he has sold, plus 2 more items that he has extended a contract on. So the share of spend should increase, for which we need to understand the share of spend and what all the SME is spending on, more than what you traditionally go to them for, like marketing or the print book. And the third tool is something that we call cohort analysis, which is if your customer experience for your customer is good, the drop through from when you acquire a new customer to when they stop being an active customer is not very steep. So basically, looking at when you acquire the customer, or say in a month, in January you acquired 1,000 customers, by Feb, March and April, how many have fallen off, and has the fall off reduced and stabilized faster?
So I'm going to just throw this out there. I don't think great customer experience and a sales-driven culture are necessarily compatible. Agreed. So if you look at the great customer experiences around the world, most of them are product and service driven.
That sits right back at what I started off with this morning. You know, it's where does the sales start and finish? Where does the service experience start and finish? And you've got to start rolling the whole thing together, because if you can't, if you don't do that, it kind of sits to what Swami's just been talking about. You know, you've got to start almost thinking about. You start your sale by saying, what have I got to be doing to make sure this customer renews with me in 3 months' time, 6 months' time, 12 months' time? Exactly. That for me is what customer experience is about. You know, in fact, it's a lot less about the experience he has at the start. You know, you've got to be thinking about what his experience is going to be much further down the line. And you almost start with that. It's almost like, you know, putting the cart before the horse, but it's not, if you know what I mean.
If I can comment on one thing, just on your presentation earlier, and you're talking about don't let your sales guy just meet the customer once a year and do it more often, right? So for me, in my previous startups and in this one, what I observe with most SaaS companies is that you don't even meet the customer, or you probably meet the customer once for a sale, and SaaS revenues are much smaller, and the sales cycles are almost monthly. So even if you take Netflix, which is a loved brand, you're talking about getting monthly contracts, and you drop off and get back on any time. I was amazed when I came into the Yellow Pages world, when even today, you could go and sell an annual contract to a customer.
For digital advertising even, yeah.
Even for digital, exactly. And digital advertising, even for like messaging solutions and bot solutions that we deliver through our directory providers. Now that's amazing. Why? Say in a month, say a customer came on board, and in month 3 or the first 3 months, the value of the product to the customer has not been good. But you have the ability to go and fix that and improve the experience in the next 9 months. That's not something any SaaS or most SaaS businesses have. But the question then is, how do you engage constantly during that 12-month period that you have the contract for? Not necessarily just with the sales team, but also with content, with newsletters, with other thought leadership and material that's going out to them. And there are some of us who are doing it better. If I can share, like for example, the Singapore Yellow Pages group, for example, is driving some sharing, knowledge sharing, and training related initiatives to augment just the product sales that is happening within that segment. So doing that thing to enhance your value with SME and build the trust, I think that will help you much more, help us much more as a group.
So I'm curious, sort of your perspective will be quite different, and if you sort of have some observations on what are some common features of companies that have great customer experience, if you have some perspective on that.
Sure. My experience is more rather than a sort of a B2B context, more of a B2C customer-facing sort of user experience online. And what it really boils down to on that side is more about reducing friction. Is really what it boils down to. It's allowing people to do what they want to do as easily as possible, and removing all barriers to to allowing that to happen. And it sounds pretty easy, but actually it's quite difficult to do. And understanding your customer and what they really want. I think there's a lot of we're seeing a wave now of AI-empowered solutions where the AI is certainly in China anyway. That's starting to drive a lot of innovation, a lot of better conversion, and actually knowing what the customer wants to do before they know what they want to do. Right. Which is actually taking this to the next step. So it's not almost about reducing the friction to allow them to do what they want to do, but also at the same time, knowing what they want, knowing your customer, having the data on them to actually, give them what they want. It's going from pull to push, right?
So being a little futurist with this, but I'm wondering if AI, people always say, what jobs are AI going to eliminate, robots and AI? And I would propose that the salesperson may be one of those on the list that is threatened by, because as you say, if the machine can understand what the customer wants before they want it and put that proposition in front of them, who needs a salesperson?
I'm not sure whether it's a case of making the salesperson redundant, because one could argue, as I was making the point yesterday, some of your back office people now are as valuable to you as your salespeople. It's just a redefining of the role. Anyone who touches the customer, is a value point in the organization. I think where I'm kind of coming at it from is the old model, the salesperson was the single point of decision and failure. In the new world, it's less so. You've got multiple touch points across an organization now with your customer, so that there is less, if you like, responsibility or weight on the shoulders of the frontline salesperson to be that single point of interaction with the customer. You've now got multiple touch points, and as a consequence, you therefore should be able to build a stickier relationship with your customer, providing each of those touch points is adding value.
So you think it's just a more well-prepared salesperson as opposed to a replacement of the salesperson?
It needs to be a much more well-prepared organization. I don't think transformation starts or ends with the sales force. Transformation starts and finishes in the boardroom, at the CEO level, and has to be permeated right through every facet of the organization.
Does WeChat have a single salesperson?
WeChat doesn't really, the WeChat team don't use salespeople. So their strategy is always to open things up. Yeah. And they're in a very fortunate position, right? So the people are willing to actually, from the B2B side, some of their stuff is terrible, but people have to work with it. It's kind of like where WeChat deal with it.
Right. Yeah. So they haven't mastered customer experience in that sense.
Not from the B2B side at all. No. From a B2C side, extremely strong.
Right.
Yeah. And that's kind of like their whole philosophy is, we have the users to work with us. Right. Yeah.
Which is a strategy that is probably consistent across all the major digital brands, certainly.
Well, to what Matt just said, that sort of virtuous circle that has kind of kept this industry going for however long it has been, still sits there at the end of the day. It's still driven around, you're creating value at somewhere down that chain, either for the user, in turn then for the advertiser, and then in turn for the stakeholder in the organization. It's just that I think the inputs into that virtuous circle, are much different now. I mean, in the old Yellow Pages model, it all started with the user. Now it's, with the content you provide or with the partner propositions you bring in, the points of value creation are different and varied throughout, the whole journey and experience.
Shift gears a little bit. One of the themes of this event was voice, but I'm not sure we really addressed the question of how voice changes the business model of advertising, and just more broadly, sort of how does voice, what kind of changes should this industry expect from voice, and how should it adapt to it? I mean, just the idea of you ask a question, you get a single response instead of a page full of responses, which means less inventory, which creates a whole set of questions about how do you monetize that. So I don't know, Matt, if you have any particular thoughts, or Swami?
Yeah, I totally agree with your point there. I struggle to see it. I struggle to see it. Voice is a very, in my market in China, voice is not really taken off yet. It's clearly got traction in the States, and it's becoming a thing, and there are players jumping on board. But actually, how you monetize that, I can't see it yet. I think it is a technology that we shouldn't ignore. I don't think it's going to be the main sort of way that people do things, but it will be a channel, a very important channel. And monetizing that really doesn't, I can't see it right now. I don't know if
You must have an idea.
I'm actually quite optimistic on voice. Till about 35 or 40 years ago, voice was the lead channel for connectivity, communication, marketing, sales, and everything else. And only in the last 35 years, with Moore's law and with like the computers taking over, and after that the mobile, chat has been a dominant trend. There are a lot of challenges with voice. Across Asia, I think it's going to be much slower. There are about 12 countries around the world that we have evaluated and seen as kind of market leaders for voice and voice automation and voice technologies. Various factors, including languages, accents, how many technology companies are working on those voice conversions there, and how much is it tested and improved, how much of machine learning is applied in those unique markets, how much money is there to be spent within that market for making the voice technology better. So there are various factors which will drive where voice will be faster versus slower. I have very little of internal context in China. I do think there should be a pretty large voice play in China. Advertising in voice actually is quite open. The thing we know is all the big advertising players, including Google and Facebook, have invested in voice technology. But the interesting thing with voice is players who did not have a web play, like Amazon, have a play now, because they were not confined to web advertising. They were not confined to the mobile phone form factor. So they are pushing with Alexa and Lex, which is Alexa outside of the device in any other environment. So they are trying to bring in voice and try to get back the leadership they lost in the web or mobile world. Now, will that mean, hey, I'm talking to a device and I'm getting a single channel response, so it can't be SCM type or like a list of advertisers who can get displayed? Or is it omni-channel, like, yes, I'm talking to a device and I'm getting a voice response, but that information is available on a connected common internet environment or a cloud, and that will allow retargeting and advertising to happen over other mechanisms, web, chat, email, and every other, but that direct voice response is still kind of optimized to what that customer experience should deliver. Any of that is possible, but I think advertising will continue. Advertising will evolve with voice on omni-channel rather than just voice in, voice out.
How about for messaging? What are some things that the publishers that are attending this event can think about, how to think about messaging as it can be a channel to communicate with their customers, it can be a channel for their customers to communicate with their customers, but what are some business model ideas around messaging that they should sort of kick around?
I think in the short term there's a lot more excitement around the messaging space than there is around voice. I think I'm with Matt, I wouldn't ignore voice in the long term, but I think Dan gave some really interesting insights yesterday as to where the whole messaging space is going, and again, particularly around the whole making things easier and more efficient for a business. I think people are more familiar and more habitual with messaging right now, so I think there's a lot more to be seen in that space before voice really comes into its own.
Yeah, definitely agree with Paul. I think, so voice is for the future. It's not there today. There is pretty much, and we've done a half a dozen like POCs and environments in hotels and malls and all kinds of environments where voice could be interesting. But none of them, let's not kid, none of them are production ready. They're not actually applicable as it is today. Messaging is very real, yeah, because all of us spend a significant portion of our day doing that. Messaging is immediate. We can apply it right now. So be it your brands and how you are engaging with your customer, which is the SME, through messaging as a channel, or your customers engaging with their customer, or even internal messaging environments to make your internal processes more efficient. All these are very real. and it's just about taking. So when you're selling, Peter was talking earlier about call tracking, and the equivalent analogy that I would say is if you're pushing a website to a customer, you're building one, a website without a chat is like a store without a staff. People can come in, walk around, see things. There's no one to ask a question. They walk away. You don't know if that's a lead. What kind of lead is it? What question do they have? Messaging brings along bots and AI and other things, but don't try to boil the ocean. Try to solve it in phases. Solve the most immediate problem. So today, if there is no salesperson in your store, first put that, and then you can focus on how to automate or change or modify that. And that's the second feedback that I'd have. And in terms of messaging, it should be omni-channel today because customers come from multiple channels. So messaging can't be a single channel like just for your website, but it has to be across wherever the customer is. Skype, WhatsApp, WeChat, Facebook, your website. Wherever the customer comes, they expect chat as a channel if they're coming from a laptop or a phone. Yeah. It has to be chat-based.
Well, so you must have a perspective, the WeChat expert. I mean, clearly you can't just grab what they do and just replicate it. That's not, but there must be a few, boiling it down to a few things perhaps people can take away from their success.
So the original point is how to promote, it was about advertising, wasn't it?
People in this room are trying to figure out how do we take all these technologies that we're talking about and then turn that into a product or a service that I can either monetize or gain some sort of efficiency from, or improve the business in some way. Revenue is usually the first thing people think about, but there's other ways you can use these things to improve the business. But
the limiting factor with voice is choice.
Right.
With every other mechanic that we've talked about, the consumer has a choice. They can see and choose from a range. If you're talking into an Alexa or whatever, you're going to get one response. I don't think right now the consumer market is ready for just a single response every time.
Yeah. But messaging, as to Swami's point, is right there now, and people are monetizing it right now to great effect. And yeah.
Well, actually, messaging is a very closed environment. It's very personal. And advertisement doesn't work very well, actually, in that environment. I think we've seen efforts from Facebook Messenger to throw adverts directly into a timeline. And that's, I can't believe they actually tried to do that because it's just horrendous.
No, that is not good customer experience.
Right.
Yeah.
And actually, when we talk about WeChat advertisement, it's actually on the news feed. It's not happening mostly in the chat aspect.
But so transactions can occur in chat, right?
Sorry?
It can be a transactional environment, can't it?
Yeah. So for customer service and for e-commerce, in China, people have the user habit of doing that within the chat environment, and they don't think it's strange. They've been conditioned, and I think that's because WeChat's been has evolved in an environment and really had been able to grow up along with the mobile internet in China. So they've had a lot of advantages in that they've been able to form habits and shape how people use the mobile internet, which people, companies outside China don't have those same advantages. Right. When you look at platforms like WhatsApp, WhatsApp's a perfect example because they don't really have a business model right now. They don't monetize. There is no way for most businesses to interact in that environment in a formal way.
How many WhatsApp users are there worldwide? Offhand,
It's over 1.2 billion, I think. But if you look at South America, for example, all businesses are using WhatsApp in some way in that market, but they're doing it, they're doing it in very informal ways through personal accounts, is my understanding, and there's no way for transactions really to work. They haven't built out an infrastructure, which to me is crazy.
Much the same in Africa as well. Much the same in Africa as well.
Right. Yeah.
South Africa is WhatsApp's biggest market per capita anyway.
What do you think they should be doing to monetize that?
Well, people have been saying it for years. They just need to copy the WeChat model. It's not that simple. But WeChat's got the advantage that they're in a homogenous market and one where people are very business focused and transactional focused. They've got strong cultural factors playing into their success. Whereas WhatsApp's a global product, so they're dealing with users with very different habits in Africa, in South America, and in Southeast Asia, and in the States. So that makes whatever they do, they have to think of it globally. Having said that, I'm surprised they've done so little so far, because I think there is a massive opportunity there. But so when and they are trying to open it up, and they've been making small announcements for a long time, and recently it seems they're doing some beta testing, but we don't really know when that's going to roll out. But when it does, that is a huge global opportunity for all small businesses to jump on that platform and do something a bit better in terms of customer service. And I doubt, just going back to my original point, they're going to struggle with advertisement because they do not have a news feed and they do not have an ecosystem like WeChat does.
Maybe they can monetize it through providing tools and services to small businesses.
Yeah.
To help them use it as a channel.
Yeah, that's what Line does. So Line in Japan, I think, and also Thailand is pretty big, right? So they charge for the use of the service.
Yeah, at the moment for WhatsApp, any form of advertising would be perceived as being intrusive because it's...
No,
Yeah.
I just think
you're not allowed to.
advertising may be like fighting the last war in terms of thinking about how to monetize these channels. It's not about advertising, it's about other things.
Absolutely.
Tools, it's e-commerce, it's transactions.
And data.
Yeah, and data, of course.
I actually see a huge opportunity for the service providers with this messaging explosion because, in a way, unlike China, we don't have a single WeChat. So today, as publishers, we are focused on trying to build websites for businesses. Some of the businesses are spending on AdWords and stuff to drive traffic. So if you put a messaging there, you're already talking about one channel through which you have to either capture a lead or engage a customer and have somebody to respond to that and give a good customer experience when people are asking questions. Facebook is opening up, so when your sales team is going and selling Facebook, the first thing I would recommend is pull Facebook Messenger in. Because today you see Messenger as just like, okay, it's just a chat thing that's there. Make that part of your bundle because there is so many things that you can do in the form of lead capture or servicing a transaction or customer service through that messaging interface as well. Don't leave that for an after sale if you're already setting up a Facebook page or selling a Facebook ad package. Next, if WhatsApp comes out, and like you rightly said, I mean, there are 10,000 businesses just in Malaysia which are selling only on WhatsApp, just on WhatsApp. They don't have a store, they don't have any other. Their address is WhatsApp and they sell through that. By end of the year, likely, we expect maybe they will open up the APIs, which means WhatsApp will become one more channel. We're not even talking about Instagram and Twitter and Skype and many others, but just with these three channels, unlike China, now a small business has to manage 3 channels on the end facing the customer and 1 or 3 or 5 or 10 staff on the back end, all talking through this multiple routing. People are leaving, there's attrition internally, there is customers inquiring in the day and in the night, and you got to manage all that chaos. Huge opportunity for publishers in terms of playing. And I think in the Western world, that's a bigger opportunity for a publisher than in a China kind of market where it's a single platform, so it's a direct play between the SME and the consumer.
Yeah, that makes sense. So for these messaging channels, at least in China, like most small businesses will use it in the same way they use an email list. Because what you'll get is you get a push notification, and so it's really the same as email, is how it's treated in terms of, okay, that's my way where I can essentially spam my users once a week.
Yeah, because email marketing is still a huge channel in the States. And
Yeah.
I think it's sort of a non-starter.
It still is in Western Europe.
Yeah.
That's the core value, actually, that most businesses see in WeChat is the push notification. Unfortunately, there's so much more you can do, but that's the big one.
Which actually, from my conversations with WhatsApp, is actually one of the lead reasons why they are apprehensive on pushing that B2C, because they do not want that push notification as a way to lead to attrition of consumers using it as a consumer chat instance. So that's one of the other, of course, being how Facebook perceives kind of WhatsApp versus Facebook Messenger and which one they need to push. But the challenge is in terms of managing that blast out versus it's an engagement and a personal space platform.
Right.
Yeah, I think, but no one's really worked it out. I mean, that's the thing. I mean, it's just a very closed, it's an unnatural marketing environment. It's a personal it's built for personal communication. It's not natural marketing territory.
Right. But when you have 1 billion users, you have to figure out a way to take some money from it.
Because right now they do not have a business model. Yeah.
Yeah, hence it's relevant for CX or customer experience and customer service rather than marketing.
Right, right. Okay. Well, look, I think we're going to wrap it up there unless there's somebody in the audience who wanted to make a comment or ask a question. Otherwise, we will call it an end. And thank you to this panel. But we do want Oscar to come up and make a few final remarks. If you can join us, Oscar. Just jump up on stage.